What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stokastic channel. Today, we're talking some college football DFS. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We are also brought to you by Bet365, and I have the correct overlay today. Right now, you can bet $5 in any game, whether it's a side or total. They're giving you $150 in the form of bonus bets. And better yet, if you go to our site, Stokastic, and you click the deals page, you will see get sims for free. You hover over that, and then basically you are going to have a chance to take advantage of not only that Bet365 offer, but any of these offers you see here. All you do is click claim on something you haven't used yet, follow these steps, and you're also getting one free month of the sims in addition to whatever the bonus was. So that's $150 from Bet365 and a month of the sims. You can use this on multiple sports books. That means you can have multiple months of the sims. It's a fantastic deal that we are not going to have around forever, the best one I've ever seen. So make sure you take advantage of this. This includes college football. The links are below. Of course, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. All right. To the back end player data usage tool. I don't know why this is on UAB Memphis. I'm going to change that before I bring it onto the screen. That's not even on the main slate. All right, here we go. This is the start of the main slate. This is available along with projections and all kinds of stuff on the back end at Stokastic. All right, fun slate, weird slate. Tulane and Navy will kick us off. 7-point spread in favor of the road team Tulane, 54 total. Very slow pace, so we are expecting at least some explosive output. Tulane is 122nd in pace. Navy is 131st. Darian Mensah is a pocket passer who gives you almost nothing with his legs. In fact, they sub in Ty Thompson on clear rushing situations. And Mensah is part of a very low volume offense. Even at 5,800, team total here is not high enough to really consider him strongly in this game. You can consider Mekhi Hughes. They absolutely slaughtered, I believe it was Temple in their last game. I may be wrong on that, but that's why you saw all these guys carry the ball. If you look back the 3 prior games, he had at least 26 carries in all of those. And he does have a good route rate. It hasn't always led to targets, but he's out there around 50% of the routes, and it's jumped up to 60 in some of the more competitive games. So Mekhi Hughes is completely fine if you want to play him. In the receiving room, this is where things get a little dicey. Williams, Keith Brown, and Dante Fleming are your top 3. The best thing you can really say about these guys is that they're all below 4K. Now, it's a run-based offense that's not going to run a lot of plays. But if you just look at the games that are mostly competitive, Williams and Fleming are probably your 2 best options. Keith Brown has a little bit more of a rotational role. Certain games, he's dropping below 40, 50% of the routes. Guys like Bryce Bohannon will factor into things. They've also used some more players recently, like Fats Watts. They got back Shaz Preston, the LSU transfer. So there is a little bit of volatility here. I think you can still throw some darts on a couple of these guys. On the Navy side, this is a triple option offense. With Blake Horvath, you basically have to treat him as a glorified running back. Somehow he is averaging 128 passing yards per game. Does have 870 rushing. The team total here is 23, just not going to be a priority for me. At running back, Dabo Fofana popped up for a decent game when we hadn't seen that in the 3 previous. You're basically going to see 4 guys carry the bulk of the load here outside of Horvath. It's Alex Texa, Dabo Fofana, Eli Heidenreich, and Brandon Chapman. I don't think you can really strongly consider any of these guys outside of maybe Fofana, who's the stone man. Haven't seen anything on an injury with him or something. This just seems to be an error. But yeah, you're not playing a pass catcher for Navy, so that about does it with this team. Texas takes on Arkansas, 13-point spread, 57.5 total in this game. Fast pace, both teams in the top 41. Pass rates are good for both Texas. They're at 51% pass. Quinn Ewers takes a ton of sacks, which really limits him. He's basically going to need to get 300 yards at this 8,700 price tag. Arkansas's defense has been bad this year, but they've also been very injured. So I don't buy some of these defensive metrics you see up at the top, like the 8.6 yards per pass attempt. This could be a little tougher than what the stats indicate. And Ewers has just flat out been bad in a lot of games. So he's very tough for me to click at this price. In the backfield, things got even greasier last week. Quintravion Wisener only carried the ball 4 times. And if you're wondering why, on his second carry of the game, he was completely stopped in the backfield. And instead of doing what running back should do and like taking 2-yard loss and just getting what he could. He decided to turn back around, run the opposite direction like it's Madden, and he ended up taking like a 14-yard loss. He probably hit the bench for about a whole quarter after that, and then they were smoking. I can't remember who they played. They absolutely annihilated Florida. They absolutely annihilated Florida so bad that he got back into the game and bailed everyone out with a receiving touchdown. I thought he was just going to stone hit the bench and not come back. This is the kind of stuff that got Jaden Blue benched originally. I don't think there's a big leash on any of these guys. Jarek Gibson has played some. A lot of this came in blowout, but I mean, I don't trust any of the Texas backs right now. Blue had the fumbling problems, which got him benched. Wisner turning and running the opposite direction of the direction he should, got him benched. It's just really tough to project. I'll probably end up playing some. I don't know the answer right now. And it's probably just play the guy who other people aren't playing because of how volatile this is. At receiver, Jonte Cook left the program, which consolidated things a little bit. As we predicted, Texas didn't use anything close to their full-time roles for these receivers. I think when everyone is healthy in a competitive game, you are likely going to see the bulk of the routes go to Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, and some combination of Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore. Not buying Silas Bolden or Amari Nyblack or Juan Davis, anyone else on this team. Which, factoring in price, Matthew Golden is always going to be someone I'm interested in. He's just so uninvolved right now that it's really hard to play him. He's a pure win sprinter. The best option price adjusted is honestly probably tight end Gunnar Helm, who has at least 4 targets in 4 straight games. Some of these more blowouts than others. It's tough to play any Texas pass catchers right now because they have so many talented guys. They're just not forced to really play any of them at a full-time role. On Arkansas, Taylon Green, he's been banged up of late, which has affected his designed rush attempts. He's been at 5 or fewer in 2 of the last 4 games, which kind of makes him hard to play at 8,200. You just don't know what you're getting health-wise. And if he's not running the ball, he's not really that enticing, especially against the number 1 defense in the country, so he'll be a hard pass. They're also getting back Jaquindon Jackson, and then their lead back, Braylon Russell, is on the injury report this week. You might see this be as wide as 4 running backs. Rashad Dubinian, he led the team last week. The week prior to that, it was Braylon Russell. On the season, it's Jaquindon Jackson. He's missed the last 2 games. You're certainly not playing Jackson against the number 1 defense in the country at 7,200. Another difficult situation to target. At receiver, I think this also applies to Andrew Armstrong. Maybe you could throw a dart on him. He's averaging 107 yards per game, but we're expecting efficiency to drop. One of the weird nuances with Arkansas is that 2 of their ancillary tight ends left the program, Ty Washington and Varquise Gums. That hasn't really consolidated routes for Luke Haas. I mean, a little bit. He did see 55% of the routes last week, which was basically a season high. But they're playing 4 wide receivers a ton. They're using Tyron Broden, Isaiah Satina, and Isaac Tesla at the expense of a tight end. So it's pretty tough to play any of these guys, especially in this passing offense. If you force me to pick anyone outside of Andrew Armstrong, it will be Satina, but I feel very poorly about that and likely will play very few of these guys, sprinkling in tournaments or pass. Utah, Colorado, 10.5 point spread in favor of the Buffs. 46.5 total. Utah plays at a horrific pace. They're 124th. Clearly expected to slow the game down here. They keep suffering QB injuries. Brandon Rose, who they tried to start over Isaac Wilson last week, is out. So we're back to Isaac Wilson, their 4-star freshman, who they are giving the Caleb Williams treatment. Sucks for him. Hope he hits the portal and goes somewhere that'll treat him better. But he's not playable for DFS at this price. He can't run. He can't throw. Can't do anything. And a lot of his best weapons are out, including Brant Kuithe, which muddles this situation even further. They lost Money Parks the week prior. Micah Pittman is away from the team. So Dorian Singer is kind of the only guy left for Utah. Everyone else is – I mean, they're going to use like 4 tight ends at this point. Carson Ryan had a 60% route rate in the last game, and the receivers were even worse. Munir McClain was at 96%. I mean, this is bad. This is really bad. Maybe you could throw a dart on him. He's the stone minimum. I mean, this is probably just a team you're, for the most part, Xing out. I don't even know who's going to play. So, yeah, I guess to round this all out, Micah Bernard is the only player they have with a pulse. Jalen Glover hit the transfer portal. He's been their change of pace back the last 2 weeks. Charlie Vincent, Dejon Stanley, Mike Mitchell are still there. None of them saw a carry in the last game. I mean, I don't know what this team. Their implied team total is 18. Perhaps it's Micah Bernard or Dorian Singer. Otherwise, Carson Ryan's probably going to play a lot of snaps he did last week. And then Munir McClain. This is bad, guys. It's bad. With the total being so low, Shedeur does not project near his 320-yard average this year. He still has 38.5 attempts per game. Utah did get a lot of their defenders back last week. So this is probably a more difficult matchup on paper than we would normally think, at least historically this year. Shedeur still comes in with negative rushing numbers. Despite his rushing output increasing, he has at least 6 designed rush attempts in the last 3 games, but he still won't stop taking sacks. I don't know if this is a deep developing route concept problem where Shedeur can't process quickly. Something's going on leading to a lot of sacks, and it's not the offensive line. They're actually a decent unit this year. In the backfield, Michael Welch has been out the last 2 games, which has kind of consolidated things between Augustave and Hayden. This is a very poor rushing attack. They have run the ball more recently, but it's kind of just been this 1-game blip where Augustave had 22 carries. Not really expecting it to persist. At receiver, Jimmy Horn slipped on a tortilla 5 snaps into their last game, ruining all my hopes and dreams. But that allowed Travis Hunter, LeJontay Wester, and Will Shepherd to play virtually every single snap. Not that that's new. This is very clearly what they're trying to do. Without Jimmy Horn, we did see Draylon Miller jump to 57% of the routes. That was about it. They kind of rotated everyone else on the field after that. So I guess to sum this up, I mean, Hunter's always playable, even though he's expensive. Shepherd, he saw 11 targets without Jimmy Horn. Jimmy Horn, if he plays, would be a fine play. And then Draylon at 3K flat is playable as well, but I would have him behind Will Shepherd, price adjusted on this slate. Clemson takes on Pitt. This is a 10-point spread in favor of Clemson, 53.5 total. Pace is great in this game, and total might be a little light. I kind of think that it is. Clemson's 52nd in pace. Pitt is 3rd in pace. Both teams very pass-friendly. A lot of injuries on Clemson's defense as well, some on Pitt. Klubnik, same deal on him. He is, I think, fairly price-adjusted. He dices up bad teams. He's horrible against good teams. And Pitt, despite their record, there's a lot of flukiness to their box scores. Eli Holstein is among the top quarterbacks in turnover-worthy plays, but just an incredible amount of defensive interceptions that have been dropped for him. So he's run basically hotter than the sun, getting Pitt to their 7-2 record or whatever it is. Anyway, I think Klubnik does have some success here. His rushing floor is much better than prior years. He's averaging 35 attempts per game, 250 yards through the air. You can certainly play Klubnik. If this game plays to the spread, Maffa is going to have like 28 touches. They only ease off of him when games are out of reach. That's probably not the case in this game, given the spread, but I mean, it's always a risk. Maffa, 7,300. He's not the stone lock he was last week, but he's firmly in play, and he's a great play. 109 yards per game on the ground. He also has an awesome route rate. We've finally seen this actually come to fruition a little bit. 60% of the routes on the year. He's up at like 70% of these competitive games. 7 targets over the last 2. That's at least nice to see. At wide receiver, Tyler Brown is the only guy that's missing at this point, which kind of muddles things for Clemson, but I think we do know what their roles are moving forward. Antonio Williams is the wide receiver 1. Brenningstool, he's the second most active in terms of routes. I don't think he's the second most active in terms of targets on a week-to-week basis. And part of that is just because at receiver, you have a lot of mouths to feed. TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco, Troy Stellato, Adam Randall, Cole Turner, they're all going to play some snaps. To break it down, TJ Moore last week, 57% of the routes. That was about where he's been recently. And Bryant Wesco, 68%. Same with him. These are the 2 guys I want to play outside of Williams and Brenningstool. And their prices are cheap enough where I think you can do just that. These are 2 of the better value plays, in my opinion, on the slate. And I have no issues getting to either of them. On Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein is questionable for this game. If he misses, I'm probably not playing anyone on Pitt. Nate Yarnell is far from, at least skill-wise, what Holstein provides. Holstein's actually a good runner. Great floor with him. Yarnell doesn't really do that. And for all of Holstein's flaws, which he has a lot of them, he does have like this Jameis Winston gunslinger mentality, which isn't always the worst thing for DFS. He's not a good play on this slate. Their team total is only 22 points, but if you wanted to play him in a contrarian sort of build, I think it'd be okay. In the backfield, Desmond Reed should not be 9,600 on DraftKings. Just flat out shouldn't be. He's a great, his role is awesome. It looks like Rodney Hammond is going to take a red shirt, so he doesn't really threaten you anymore. But yeah, man, just Clemson, 22 team total, 9,600. Like, I think Maffa's straight up a better play than Des Reed. So he's probably just a casualty of cost on this slate. Kanata Mumfield's hurt. We don't know if he's going to play. If he doesn't, I think that would pretty clearly consolidate Raphael Williams at 3,700, Kenny Johnson at 39, and Sincerely at 35. Bartholomew also not going to really leave the field at tight end. That's really the only way I have a lot of interest in Pitt is if Mumfield is out and then all these guys are somewhat underpriced. But still, that would be a little dependent on Holstein. I do not have any faith in Yarnell. Yarnell started games last year, and it was some of the worst football I've ever seen in my whole life. Syracuse takes on Cal. 8-point spread in favor of Cal, a 56 total. Pretty good pace in this game. Syracuse 50th, Cal 46. Great pass rate on both sides. Kyle McCord still taking sacks, but the big difference between McCord and like Shedeur Sanders, you have more passes with McCord just every single game. They're among the country's leaders in pass rate. He's averaging 48 attempts per game. So, the floor is just so much better with McCord than a guy like Shedeur. Even with McCord averaging 349 passing yards per game, 348.5. The thing is with him, he's 9,300. So it's just like, am I really going to pay 9,300 for a guy that could end up with like virtually a touchdown erased from him because he's going to take so many sacks? So he's tough to click. In the backfield, LaQuint Allen is the only player that's healthy. So they've actually been using tight end and sort of like H-back. I don't know. Swiss Army knife. Dan Villari is the change of pace. But LaQuint Allen right now is one of the best roles in college football. He hasn't seen fewer than 6 targets in a game in the last 3 games. Hasn't seen fewer than 15 carries in that span either. So, his touch floor in that span has been like 21 touches, 22 touches. Incredible role. Anyway, at wide receiver, we have seen sort of a consolidation for this team. We already knew that Trevor Pena and Amari Gadsden were going to play every single snap, but Jackson Meeks has been so good that they haven't been able to take him off the field. And then they gave Daryl Gill a 74% route rate. Umari Hatcher was down at 6%. Even Justice Ross Simmons, who had been at 47, dropped down to 26. I don't really want to play anyone other than Gadsden, Meeks, or Pena. I think those are just flat out end of story, the 3 best plays on Syracuse. They're all priced up now, so you're not getting a discount on any of them, but you could use one or a couple of them as a run back if you're playing something on Cal. Fernando Mendoza, 7,200. He's not really a runner, but he has been pretty efficient through the air. 275.5 yards per game. Now he's facing Syracuse's atrocious defense. It's at least worth mentioning the best path to beating Syracuse is on the ground. They have a ton of injuries up front on that unit. But they haven't had a successful rushing attack all season long, which brings me to Jaden Ott. Immediately ice Javian Thomas at the expense of Cal as a team because Ott has been so bad this year. He got hurt like immediately, so I don't think this is like talent regression or something. We have a couple of years sample of Ott being absolutely awesome. He just keeps trying to play through this injury, and he's been horrible doing it, and it's cost Cal. Cal lost to Florida State. That's Florida State's only win is against this horrible Cal team. So I don't know. I don't trust them to make a right decision at running back. I don't think you can play Ott at 7K. He's just not healthy. Wide receiver is a complete and utter mess. They brought back Tobias Merriweather and Kion Grace. They're 2 premier transfers that entered the program this year. Basically, nobody had a route rate above 60%. And even like Jack Endress, the tight end, we immediately saw that he did not earn more playing time when Corey Dykes got hurt. Immediately back down to 47% route share. Dykes at 33%. The only thing I could see doing is playing Tobias Merriweather on the hope that he has a better route rate second game back from injury. First game back from injury, 10 targets, 52% of the routes. That's not great. And he's priced up at 4,800. So you're still kind of like playing Merriweather on a hope and a prayer that this continues. Cal might be a team I have very little of, which is painful because they have a 32 team total. It's just they're using so many receivers. Jaden Ott's not healthy. And the best path for Cal is on the ground. So does Mendoza even have like the 35.5 attempts he's had historically? We'll see. LSU, Florida. This has come down. It was 4.5 in favor of LSU. It's now 3.5 because Lagway is going to play. More on that in a second. Total's 55 points. LSU has a very good pass rate at 61%. Nussmeier doesn't run 21 yards on the ground, but he does average 318.5 through the air. Florida's pass defense has been suspect, especially recently as they've lost players to injury in the secondary. Nussmeier at 9,100 is not my favorite play up at the top, but he's not going to project poorly. I imagine he'll be something close to neutral. Caden Durham, clearly not 100% healthy. His carries have dropped in 2 straight games. They're getting Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson back involved. Just not really a situation you can target. At receiver, it's Kyron Lacey, Aaron Anderson, and it looks like CJ Daniels. Mason Taylor's not really leaving the field. LSU's had a bunch of injury stuff all season long. People keep trying to hype up guys like Chris Hilton. It's just to the point where I'll believe it when I see it with all those other guys. Until then, I'm going to believe that it's CJ Daniels, Aaron Anderson, and Kyron Lacey, which it's been all season long for the most part. Daniels is 3,500, which is interesting to me. I would certainly prefer him over Mason Taylor, but Lacey's too expensive for my liking. Anderson is kind of a little bit overpriced at 5,500. He's only averaging 5.8 targets per game over the last 4. I think the cheapest guy, CJ Daniels, makes the most sense in this spot. Lacey, I always get like a little bit of him I usually run 150 and usually get a little bit of him with Nussmeier up at the top. Lagway at 5,400, I am very interested in this. Lagway has awesome efficiency metrics. He runs a little bit. He's coming off a hamstring injury, but he's now been practicing for 2 weeks. I think the optics of that hamstring injury are going to keep people off him, but man, this is a great price. Their team total is fine for an underdog, and it's getting better because of his status. He just breathes life into the whole Florida team, which now you can actually consider these guys. I'll probably be playing some Lagway. They seemed to take this very precautious with him last week. I don't think we need any more precaution. 5,400 is a solid price. At running back, Montrell Johnson's been practicing for 2 weeks now. He's going to return at one of these points. Competitors around the industry just preemptively project him out. I think there's a decent chance he returns this week. Montrell is from Louisiana, not to get it down narrative street, played at Louisiana. They're playing Louisiana State. It's a big game for him. They've actually been talking about it a lot in the media. I think this is the game he returns, probably rendering this unusable. Jaden Baugh, Jacoby Jackson have been in like a 50-50 timeshare. They've both been pretty good for what it's worth, but I think this could be as gross as like an even split 3 ways. At wide receiver, Elijah Badger is projected to return, which at least gives them Badger and DK. Eugene Wilson out for the year. They're just messing around at wide receiver 3. I don't even know who I would reasonably predict to run the most routes at that position right now. I guess if you force me, it might be like Marcus Burke, but I don't feel good about that. Aiden Mizell, Tank Hawkins, they've been involved. Even like Jaquavian Frazier's. It's pretty gross outside of just your top 2 options. Unfortunately, they're both cheap. DK and Badger you could both use with Lagway pretty easily. This is a semi-good game to stack despite initial appearances. Kind of like this game. I hope it comes in sneaky. Boston College, SMU, another game that has moved. Geez, I did this sheet like yesterday, and then I was looking at lines today. So SMU is now a 19.5 point favorite, and the total in the game, 54 points. Boston College looks like they're going to get rolled. Grayson James going to start this game after Castellanos got benched in their last game, got so pissed that he entered the transfer portal. I mean, good luck at Kent State. Grayson James, he's not Castellanos. He can't run or throw. He got beat out at FIU for the job. I think this Boston College team is just utterly lifeless. Trayshawn Ward did not log a carry in their last game. Yes, he did play. No carries. And Turbo Richards remains out. We don't know if he's going to return here. He was on the depth chart last week, but he was listed 4th, which doesn't really bode well for this game. Jordan McDonald functioned as the change of pace behind Robichaud. The only hope you might have for a Boston College player is simply, do they get enough volume in a beatdown? And I think the answer is probably no. At wide receiver, Jaden Skeet didn't play in their last game. They're using basically 3 tight ends now. Reed Harris had like a 90% route share. And then Jeremiah Franklin. And I mean, he's not the only one either. They're using so many tight ends. Matt Reagan's on the field at times. Kamari Morales. Even though they're not targeted, they do play. So you're seeing like nearly 70% of the time 2 tight ends. Maybe with Skeet back at some point, that would change. But it's just Lewis Bond or pass, and I'm just fully going to pass without Castellanos. SMU. Likely beatdown spot, huge team total. I think you can basically play anyone on this team. Kevin Jennings has been hyper efficient. He's now had the bye to get healthier. He runs, he passes. His props are always way too low. You can play Jennings. He's going to be one of the better price adjusted quarterbacks on the slate. Rashard Smith, 2 games in a row, 25 and 23 carries. His route rate's actually poor, but he's pretty involved on a targets per route run basis. Only 30% of the routes. That hasn't changed a ton week to week, but man, when he is running routes, they're designed for him. And then at wide receiver, well, tight end RJ Maryland's out for the year. Wide receiver Jake Bailey is potentially going to make his return. He had been practicing non-contact. He should be pretty close to returning at this point, which I think will kind of muddle things a little bit. But honestly, Romello Brinson's been out. It's a little more condensed than it ever has been with SMU. I think you could use Bailey if he plays. Jordan Hudson, Keyshawn Smith, Roderick Daniels, Moochie Dixon. My 2 favorites would be Roderick Daniels at 3,900 and Moochie Dixon at the Stoneman if you force me to pick 2 of these guys. Great situation. And Rashard Smith, he's a little expensive for my liking. I think I would rather stack SMU through the air. But, I mean, he's been just so involved recently. It's hard to knock the price tag on him. Louisville takes on Stanford. Louisville is a 20-point favorite. Another monstrous team total in this spot against a lifeless defense. Shug is 7,900. I mean, I know they're heavy favorites, but give me Shug, give me Jennings as 2 of my favorite signal callers. Shug needs to get there through the air, though that is a major concern for him. And it's not that it's efficiency or anything like that, just they might run the ball 40 times in this game. I don't know. Even when they pass, Shug should have plenty of opportunities to get there. He is a great price tag. You could throw some stacks of Louisville together pretty easily. At running back, Isaac Brown's going to be one of the best plays on the slate. He has at least 17 carries in 3 of the last 4 games. Pretty good route rate on him as well. Has seen 3 targets in at least 4 straight games. He's 6,700. I mean, he might be the best running back play on the entire slate. At wide receiver, we basically know it's Ja'Cory Brooks every snap, Chris Bell every snap. And then they have a little bit of rotating. Mark Redmond's playing a lot of tight end. And then Amari Huggins-Bruce is probably the guy you would consider wide receiver 3. But his routes have been a little up and down, which I don't trust. Last 2 weeks, 49% up to 53. They're just going to rotate other guys on the field a little bit more. I think you just want to play Chris Bell instead of Huggins-Bruce. Find the 100, just do it. And I mean, Redmond is on the field a lot. You could also just play him. Ja'Cory Brooks has to get there with efficiency, but he's done it so many times. Stanford is lifeless. Stanford QB is going to split. Easy to move on. Micah Ford, he's been hurt. I don't know if he's going to return here. They got Cole Tab involved recently. We have 4 running backs projected for work. Can't play Stanford backs. Alec A. Manor all over the board. 66 yards per game. He plays every single snap, but his targets have been yo-yoing all over the place. 5 to 9 to 13 to 6. I just don't know what they're doing. Everyone else, so uninvolved that it is very hard to play anyone. And one thing Stanford did recently was they turned up their run rate to the absolute max in their last game. I just have no idea what this team is going to do any given week. They're a complete X-out team for me. Virginia, Notre Dame. 22.5-point spread in favor of the Irish, 50.5 total. Colin Drea maybe iced the haters a little bit. He was on the hot seat, potentially going to be benched for Musket, but had a good game last week, beat Pitt. He does run a little bit, 259 yards through the air, 216.5. It's reasonable, not great, not bad. Tougher matchup here, lower total. They're only implied for 14 points. Better slates to target Colin Drea. This is not going to be one of them. Kobe Pace ceded a ton of work to Xavier Brown last week. Looks like that's devolved into a 50-50 committee, unfortunately, for Kobe Pace. At wide receiver, Malachi Fields continues to play every single snap, but for some reason his role has dropped a little bit. Maybe this is just the return of Chris Tyree, who doesn't have a whole route share, but apparently they like to target him. Andre Green has been the pretty clear wide receiver 3. They will rotate a little bit with him, making this kind of gross to target. Tyler Neville plays a ton now that we've had some tight end injuries. But Virginia is pretty easy to pass on. I might have some contrarian Fields up at the top or Tyler Neville. Otherwise, don't see much of this team in my future. Riley Leonard, same story, different week. Huge favorites on this cupcake Notre Dame schedule. He projects reasonably based on team total, but the projection's always volatile. When you have 25 pass attempts per game and you average 175 yards through the air, that's what you get. But Leonard is so good on the ground, 609 yards. He leads this team in rushing, and he has routinely broken off long runs. I'm at the point where I'm not fading these anymore. You know, you have these fluky plays, these plays that aren't normal. But when you extend the sample far enough and they continue to happen, at some point you just have to admit you were wrong. Leonard, I'm not sure he's going to project all that well at 9,500. That's the other thing, is his prices continue to rise with these long runs. But I'm no longer just blindly fading Leonard on the efficiency. He has been efficient all season long on the ground. At running back, Notre Dame is extremely willing to involve more backs other than Jeremiah Love. He's sort of like a contrarian piece if you want to be risky. The efficiency is awesome for Love. Matchups are generally pretty good with this Notre Dame schedule, but he's only averaging 13 touches per game, and that's largely the product of Notre Dame has one of the easiest schedules in the country, and somehow they found a way to lose a game. Wide receiver is basically X out for this team. I'll read you the routes just to be kind, but I mean, they rotate so much. It's pretty difficult to parse. If you wanted to play someone, it's probably Bo Collins. The problem is Bo Collins is awful. 78% route rate for him. Greathouse, 57%. Evans, 60%. He's playing more than earlier in the year off the season-ending injury. Chris Mitchell, I can't remember the route rate. It was around 55, 60%, but he wasn't targeted. Then you had Face on at 49%. This is gross. This is gross. Is what it is. Penn State, Purdue, Big Ten beatdown extraordinaires. Penn State play the corpse of Purdue, 28.5 point spread, 50 total. Slow pace. Penn State is one of the premier teams at taking their foot off the gas, so this is risky all around. Drew Aller, 223 yards per game, 172 on the ground. He might have a reasonable projection here because they're implied for 39 points, but I think what I would rather do is just play a running back. And Nick Singleton is banged up. So Katron Allen had 20 carries in their last game, 2 targets. He'll be a pretty good play at 4,900, regardless of Singleton's status. If Singleton's out, he'll be the stone chalk. Just something to monitor with him. Singleton has been limited in the last 2 games. What better time to get healthy for the playoff? You have a virtual bye against Purdue. Wide receiver, you could play Tyler Warren. He's about the only guy I think you could play up in this Purdue offense or Penn State offense. They're just really bad everywhere else. And the routes have been inconsistent. One thing they've done is sort of ice Julian Fleming, and it's about time. But he's still participating in about 40% of the routes, or a little bit more than that on a week-to-week basis. If you did want to get different, Harrison Wallace, 76% of the routes. Liam Clifford, 55%. Amari Evans was around 60%. So there kind of is what it is. Don't play anyone on Purdue, and your life will probably be pretty good. They're implied for 10 points. Baylor takes on West Virginia. 2.5 point spread in favor of Baylor. 60-point total. This is one of the better games on the entire slate. Maybe the best game on the entire slate. Sawyer Robertson has shut me up a little bit. 257 yards on the ground for him. That is way more than he's ever run for. Semi-efficient as a passer. It's caught up with him a little bit. But fortunately for him, he faces the worst defense in the Power 5 in terms of pass coverage. They're allowing 9.3 yards per attempt, nearly a first down, every single time an opponent drops back to pass. I mean, you could certainly play him. I'll skip over running back for a second and talk receivers because this is important for Baylor on this particular slate. They've had some injuries and they've been working some guys back like Keytron, Jackson. First game back, only 22.5% of the routes. Maybe that changes. I'm not sure. The players that have been most consistent, Josh Cameron's been above 78% in 3 straight games. Hal Presley was banged up a little bit midway through the season. He's been at 60 and 82% last 2. Ashton Hawkins above 78% in 3 straight. And Michael Trigg, 76, 52, and 68. Those are your most consistent receivers for this team. Monterey Baldwin has only played a lot when other receivers are hurt, so he's pretty difficult for me to get to. And Keytron, I'm just not sure. He missed 2 games, so maybe they decide to phase him back in. But I think when you look at Baylor as a whole, Cameron, Presley, and Hawkins are probably the guys you want to focus on. You could play Trigg. I have no issues with that, but I'm certainly going to be playing Baylor stacks and mixing all 4 of these players. Maybe even throw in a rogue Monterey or Keytron, but you want to target this West Virginia secondary in tournaments. In the backfield, Dominic Richardson's been out for a ton of time. I don't think we see him. Richard Reese has been phased out. He's basically a 2-down grinder. Pendergrass has been efficient on a limited sample, but he has kind of been iced by Bryson Washington, who's now expensive, $6,400. He'll be a fine play. He's definitely not someone I'm really going out of my way to play because of the volatility in Baylor's run game. I'd rather target West Virginia through the air. On the Mountaineers side, Garrett Green, 7,400. Looks like he's going to return even after Mark Hill had some awesome games. Green is more efficient on the ground, which I think is better for DFS overall. They have similar passing statistics, but you're giving up about 3 yards per carry when you go to Mark Hill over Green. So Green, nice play on this slate, assuming he's healthy. Jaheim White has iced CJ Donaldson a little bit lately. I do not think this is something. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I think this could be volatile week to week. I don't know if I buy this moving forward. At wide receiver, looks like Hudson Clement is back practicing and could be closer to his normal role, which was basically full-time pass catcher. Prior to that injury, he had a 93% route rate, the game prior to last where he didn't play. Without him, Traylon Ray jumped to 90%. Before that, he was at 76. Cole Taylor, their tight end, remained unchanged, 90% in the last two. Rodney Gallagher had a slight boost, 81% from 72. And Preston Fox went up to 67. I think Clement would hurt Fox the most in this situation. Stacks are tough, but definitely playable. West Virginia is a little more condensed than earlier this year. Nebraska USC, 9-point spread in favor of USC. This is coming down in favor of Nebraska rapidly as they change OCs. Our friend Dana Holgerson's back. Dylan Raiola, allegedly going to play, takes a ton of sacks, not very efficient through the air. I don't think you could really play him at 5,500 unless you think Holgerson revitalizes the offense to that degree. Their O-line is just bad. It's bad O-line on bad D-line. This could be gross funness. I don't know. At running back, Dante Dowdell, 14 and 17 carries in back-to-back games. Emmett Johnson still involved. Everyone else kind of phased out. This is going to be a dicey situation, but USC is a bad run defense. There are crazier things. At wide receiver, it has increasingly gotten increasingly more volatile, I suppose. Isaiah Nair is really the only consistent player. Jamal Banks is semi-consistent. Banks has been at least 74% of the routes in 3 straight. Nair was at 79% and 90, so that's still pretty consolidated. Jacorian Barney's been the wide receiver 3. Thomas Fidone has been the tight end, but you still see players rotate in. None of them are fantastic price-adjusted plays, in my opinion. It's just super inefficient passing attack. I don't know. You're putting a lot on the weight of Holgerson. Jaden Maeva steps in for Miller Moss, 7,500. He is more mobile. The question, in my opinion, is how much do they use him on designed runs, because they weren't using Moss at all in that regard. But Maeva has about 4 yards per carry in his career at UNLV. He didn't run as much as you might think. I don't know. This is pretty dicey. Maeva had one of the highest turnover-worthy play rates in the country last year in the Mountain West. Now he's going to play in the Big Ten against a pretty strong Nebraska defense. I mean, we'll see how this goes. I probably will take my shots elsewhere. Woody Marks is an awesome role, 22 touches per game. That's not changing if you want to pay the 8,500. They are big favorites, no problem there. At wide receiver, things are as gross as usual. Zachariah Branch popped up for a heavily involved game, which we hadn't seen really since like week 1 or 2. His route rate was at 70%. Jacoby Lane, 64. Kyron Hudson, 82. Mekhi Lemon, 66, at the expense of really everyone else. I think you could throw a dart at Branch, Hudson, Lane, or Lemon, but I don't feel good about this with a new quarterback coming in who's not as much of a pocket passer. To the FanDuel games we go. Arizona State, Kansas State, 9-point spread in favor of Kansas State, 50 total in this game. Sam Levitt, game manager extraordinaire, is actually priced semi-efficiently on this site. He can run the ball. 9,100, I think, is a decent price tag, but their team total is extremely low. The big thing with Arizona State is they're getting back Cam Scatabo, so we do not have Kyson Brown free square anymore. Scatabo looks efficiently priced to me, assuming he takes on his full role, which is 26 touches per game and 125 rushing yards, as well as 50.5 receiving yards per game. My goodness, talk about efficiency. At wide receiver, Jordan Tyson is the one. Immediately upon return from injury, Xavier Guillory, 90% of the routes, mostly wind sprinted his way to 2 targets. Very inefficient passing attack. Tyson or pass. He's 8,800, so you could use him. Avery Johnson, 9,600 on FanDuel, averages 210 through the air per game, 391 on the ground. His stats are like nearly identical to Levitt. I guess the main difference here is team total. But yeah, I mean, this is a similar situation. Run-heavy offense, not the most efficient pass game. Needs to get there on the ground. He's tough click, in my opinion. DJ Giddens starting to cede a little more work to Dylan Edwards. They just got rolled in their last game unexpectedly, so I think they're looking for a spark. Edwards tried to provide it, wasn't enough. Giddens I'm always interested in. You can buy low at him at 9,200. He does average 21 touches per game. Chase Brown, Keegan Johnson, and Jaden Jackson are your top 3 wide receivers. I usually don't have a lot of interest in this team from a passing perspective, unless their team total is really high or it's a competitive game. This is bordering on that with a 9-point spread. I'm not sure where I'm going to come in on Chase Brown. They've been pretty bad through the year. Trying to pull up routes right now. It's taking me forever to get there. Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary for this team. It's been like 85 to 90% Brown, upper 80s for Johnson, mid 70s for Jackson. Tennessee, Georgia, 10-point spread in favor of Georgia, 47 total. Nico Iamaleava in concussion protocol. I think he's going to play, but you never know. Not the best matchup. They have an 18.5 implied team total. Iamaleava has been terrible this year, so he's pretty easy to avoid. The only thing that would, FanDuel did do a good job with his price, 6,600. You straight up might get him in Stars and Scrubs build because he's going to play. So that's worth mentioning. Dylan Sampson has 24 touches per game. He's seen at least 26 carries in 3 straight games. Let's see these target counts. So he's seen at least 27 touches in 3 straight games. Deshaun Bishop is out. Peyton Lewis and Selden will handle change of pace work. I mean, you can play Dylan Sampson in any game. 9,800 is not expensive enough for him, just flat out. At wide receiver, Dante Thornton is questionable for this game, which is important. Tennessee has sort of mixed and matched their receivers a little bit of late. If he's out, I think you could play some guys confidently. One player who rarely leaves the field is Brew McCoy. Just hasn't shown the same explosiveness he did last year before injury. Chris Brazell, 67% of the routes. Squirrel White, 54%. Thornton, 50%. You can tell it's not, you're never going to really find someone at 90% of the routes for Tennessee. And when Iamaleava stinks, it's pretty hard to play them. Speaking of stinks, Carson Beck, 8,500. 276 through the air per game. Can't run. Love interceptions. You'll love Carson Beck. But yeah, man, I mean, the interceptions aren't the worst thing for fantasy. So I don't hate him. I certainly don't love him in this game. Their team total is only 28 as 10-point favorites. I mean, Beck's not going to project fantastic. Nate Frazier should be a very strong play on FanDuel. He's 6,100. ETN's out. Branson Robinson is hurt. Roderick Robertson's hurt. Cash Jones is on the injury report. Nate Frazier could handle a monster workload at 6,100. The wide receiver, it's Lovett, it's Bell, it's Arian Smith. They rotate 3 tight ends, and they occasionally will use London Humphreys. Never really loved Georgia passing attack options. They rarely project well because they rotate more than most teams. Oregon, Wisconsin. Oregon goes to Camp Randall is nearly 2 touchdown favorites, 51.5 total. Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, always willing to play him. He showed more rushing upside of late, averages 248 through the air. Wisconsin's defense has been very good against the very bad teams and very bad against the good teams. Jordan James is banged up. We did not know this heading into their last game, and we did not expect Noah Whittington to outcarry him 13-6 or Jalen Lamar to handle 6 carries. As long as this game remains competitive, I think Jordan James probably does not have his 20-touch role. This team is certain playoff aspirations. Running Jordan James into the ground against inferior teams like Wisconsin is just not the answer. Tez Johnson's questionable. I don't think we see him in this game, which means Evan Stewart, Justice Lowe, and Trayshawn Holden are your 3 wide receivers. Terrence Ferguson, 12 targets in his second game back for injury. Like the overs on his props. He is a fine play here as well at 6K. Lowe flat out might just be like the stone chalk of the slate. He 4 or 5-star freshman, elite routes, 97% 2 straight. Braden Locke, you can't play him on FanDuel. You just play Iamaleava or something. This is a disaster price. Can't run, can't throw, can't do anything. Tawi Walker has a great role. It's just instead of the 24, 3, 2 carries you saw the last 3 weeks, he had 16 in their blowout loss to Iowa. They need to remain competitive if he's going to touch 20. Darian Dupree is also change of pace. Like, they're using him. Not a lot, but he is out there. In the receiving game, Will Pauling finally saw his routes drop after he continues to drop balls, like just inconsistent drops across the board. And in his place, we saw Vinny Anthony, 91% of routes. And we saw CJ Williams at 70%. I don't love that. But their main 3 wide receivers were Vinny Anthony, CJ Williams, followed by Will Pauling at 51%. But Trech Kekahuna was at 45%. So right there, splitting that role. Very hard to play any of them against Oregon, even at their prices. Cincinnati, Iowa State, 7.5-point spread in favor of the Cyclones, 53.5 total. Brennan Sorsby's 9,300. This is a fair price tag for him, averaging 33 attempts per game, 192 yards on the ground, 265 through the air is reasonable. I think Corey Kiner is maybe one of the best plays on this slate at 7,400. The workload is locked in for him. We've seen him really above 21 touches in 3 straight games. Some of that in the pass game where he has a good route rate. In the pass game, Xavier Henderson, Joe Royer, Tony Johnson, and Jamoy Mays are locked in for this team. Since the injuries to Aaron Turner and Tyron Smith, you're not seeing anyone really challenge these guys. Someone reported that Aaron Turner played in their last game before going his red shirt. That's not true. He did not do that. So DraftKings had that blurb. I think they contract out to RotoWire, who doesn't know what they're doing. If you read that blurb, it's not true. Aaron Turner did not play. So it was still Mays, Johnson, and Xavier Henderson, as well as Royer. Cincinnati's fine to stack. They're not expensive. Rocco Becht, victim of his offensive line. They've lost 2 straight, and I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped to 3rd. I don't think it's likely because Cincinnati has bad defensive line, but, I mean, this O-line is a fatal flaw for Iowa State. They can't really do much. I mean, this offense is super slow. They're kind of run-heavy. Beck doesn't really run a lot himself. He has 162 yards, only 31 attempts per game, not the most efficient. Basically, he throws up Hail Marys, not actual Hail Marys. He throws up prayer balls to Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. If they don't come down with them, this team loses games. Their backfield has been a complete dice roll. Carson Hansen, I think, is the most likely to touch the ball the most, but sometimes it's Sama, sometimes it's Jalen Jackson. Tough to play any of these guys. Higgins and Noel are by far the best plays on Iowa State. The FanDuel-only games, all those previous FanDuel games, were also on DK. These two are not. Ohio State Northwestern, 28.5-point spread. Love the Ohio State guys, assuming this game remains competitive. Last game, we saw them all way down in terms of snaps. But this is not last week. Last week was Purdue. They had 10 extra points in the spread. So now Will Howard, 247, 248 yards per game, runs a little bit super expensive because he was efficient before getting pulled last week. He's tough to play, but one-off Judkins, I think you could play him at 8,200. Ibuka, Smith, and Carnell Tate. Tate especially is super cheap at 6,100. They make a lot of sense. Even G. Scott at 4,900. He's played a lot since Cass Merrick got hurt. On Northwestern, Jack Lausch was benched for Ryan Helinski. Their coach did something absolutely unbelievable. Like, in the pass game situation, they needed Helinski because of the special things that he could do with his arm. Like, give me a break. Lausch might get pulled at any point for Helinski. Don't play a quarterback there. Don't play a running back against Ohio State in a timeshare. That's what Northwestern's giving you. Bryce Kurtz is hurt. I don't know if we see him. I would doubt it. Frank Covey got hurt in their last game. Couldn't return. AJ Henning might see 12 targets, but what's the efficiency? Missouri, South Carolina, looks like we're getting Drew Pine again. So Missouri is basically a team you can X out. Their implied team total is 15. They did return Nate Noel. They use a 3-man committee between Jamal Roberts, Noel, and Carroll. That's a stone disaster. Luther Burden is having an atrocious season. He's being outgained 552 to 505 by Theo Weiss. Drew Pine is horrible. So it stems down to everyone in this offense. Mookie Cooper's out. Doesn't mean anything. This O-line for South Carolina is also a fatal flaw. Sellers somehow still has 391 rushing yards, which is crazy considering this unit. Only 180 through the air. So he's basically just like a neutral price-adjusted play. Raheem Sanders is back in the fold. He's been completely fine. When they're beating teams pretty badly, they'll use more Attaway. I think he's actually a decent price-adjusted play against Missouri on this slate. And then at receiver, this is kind of a disaster. They've had a lot of injuries, to be fair. But Simon is really the most consistent player in terms of routes. Maybe not targets week to week, but he's out there a lot. He has a route rate of at least 88% in 2 straight games. Mazio Bennett did get hurt in their second most recent game that he barely played last week. That allowed Nick Harbor to play 173% of the routes. It just was terrible on those opportunities. Larverdane, 89%, 73%. Jared Brown, 37 to 69. Vandrevius Jacobs is way down below 30 now. I mean, this is still, I don't trust this receiving core week to week because of the rotation we've seen. No one on this team averages more than 4.8 targets per game over their last 4, and no one averages more than 4 on the season. So tough to get to. But that'll do it for the main slate. Everything else on here is DK only night slate and stuff like that. Did it in under an hour again? Thank goodness. All right. If you have any questions, please leave them below or reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Matt_Gajewski. Over there, my DMs are open. Otherwise, we'll be back again tomorrow with Live Before Lock, talking more college football. And until then, good luck. We'll see you guys next time.